Welcome to the webinar, everyone. Another Wednesday, another opportunity for us to get some information about something new that we may not have known about. And today, the topic is about diabetes, a warning to your heart. A lot of people that suffer from the disease believe that it is a standalone issue, that if they have diabetes, then now all of a sudden they have to learn terms like A1C, they have to understand triglycerides, they have to understand blood sugars, they have to understand all these things. But there's a lot more to it. In fact, what we're going to learn today, that one of the things that you have to learn is the effect that diabetes can actually have on your heart. So let's kind of jump in. First and foremost, there is a direct link between diabetes and the heart. This month has been all about heart health. So far, we have covered high blood pressure, we have covered cholesterol, and now we're covering diabetes. And high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and of course, high blood sugar or diabetes are all precursor diseases to the bigger disease of heart disease. And that's what today is about, is to learn that diabetes is a precursor disease to a much bigger issue and a much bigger problem. In fact, there's some myths that we need to discover and basically throw out right at the beginning. First, if I had diabetes, I would have symptoms. Well, the reality is diabetes is non-symptomatic, or it's basically something that doesn't actually have symptoms. In fact, more than 28% of people that have the disease or are pre-diabetic don't even know they have it, because it does not have any symptoms. In fact, most people don't even know they have it until they have blood tests done. And because so many men don't have their annual physicals done for whatever reason, many of them have no idea that they're suffering from the disease or the effects that it's having on the body. But here's the bigger myth. If my diabetes was causing heart problems, I would have symptoms. That too is a major myth, causing a lot of problems with people. In fact, ladies, 64% of you will die from heart disease without ever having a prior symptom. That's right, 64% of women in this country die of heart disease with no prior symptoms of the disease before it occurs. If you have diabetes, if you have high blood pressure, if you have high cholesterol, just know this is your body's basically warning system telling you there is a much bigger thing coming on the horizon if we do not start addressing those issues post haste. How big is the problem? Well, right now in America, we have over 100 million people that are diabetic or pre-diabetic. Again, we said, 28% plus don't even know it. But the bigger issue that we have is childhood diabetes. In 2010, we had 5,000 reported cases of type 2 diabetes, and by 2015, we had over 208,000 reported cases. And these are just the people that actually go to the doctor to actually have the blood test done to determine that they actually have the disease. In fact, it's gotten so bad in children that, a term that we used to use was adult onset diabetes, or, now referred to as type 2. We've completely dropped the whole adult onset component of it now, and now we just call it type 2 diabetes. 68% of diabetics, though, will die from heart disease or stroke. See, when this first pops up, a lot of people that are listening to this webinar had no idea that this was in fact the case. 68% of diabetics will die of heart disease or stroke. And a lot of people think, well, if I get diabetes, I'll just take a sugar pill. I can just manage it that way. They have pills, they have pharmaceuticals, they have these things that I can do. And, it's not that big a deal. A lot of people have diabetes. Well, the reality is a lot of people do have it. But more importantly, a lot of people are dying from it. They just happen to die from stroke or heart disease as a result of it. So, what is the bigger issue? This one right here. You lose a half a year of life expectancy every year you have type 2 diabetes. Another way of saying the same thing, for every year that you have diabetes, you are aging at 1.5 years. You are losing a half a year of your life every year you have the disease. This is something that is reversible. This is something that you can take care of. Modifications to your daily diet and lifestyle choices can reverse this issue. You just have to want to make it happen. But this is an eye-opening effect that a lot of people had no idea was actually a part of having the disease. So is it really just something you want to manage with a pharmaceutical, or is it something that you want to understand could affect the latter parts of your life? So by 2050, what does the CDC estimate mean? It means that over 100 million plus Americans will have diabetes. Well, hold on, Mark. You already told us 100 million people have diabetes or prediabetes, and that is correct, but that includes diabetics and prediabetics. What the CDC is saying is that by 2050, we'll have 100 million people diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. That's how bad this issue is. That is the biggest issue that we're dealing with right now in this country with regard to a pandemic. We are eating ourselves to sickness, and this is just one of the byproducts of it. In fact, if you look at it closely, one of the things you'll see here is that these are the numbers that we're dealing with if you happen to be diabetic and you're not concerned about heart disease. You have a 2 to 3 times increased chance of developing heart disease if you're diabetic. 30% of the coronary stents implanted in 2011 were of diabetic patients. 280,000 heart attacks annually are of diabetic people. You have a 2 to 4 times higher rate of heart disease morbidity and mortality. In other words, you're going to die from it if you have diabetes. And of course, you have a 60% chance of dying of heart disease if you have the disease. That number's actually gone up since those stats were created. So how does this work? The simple just graphic that you can see is plaque or fatty streaks in your arteries and veins build up in the arterial walls. This narrows the artery. This happens faster in people with diabetes, as you can kind of see, because you have more of those types of things in your bloodstream, and then eventually that plaque cracks, a blood clot can form and block the artery. This causes the heart attack or stroke. And of course, the biggest issue is you can have diabetes without even knowing it, because the only real way to find it out is a blood test. But now you see how diabetes is actually causing the issues with the heart. What has been linked as the number one influencer for the risk of developing diabetes? This is one that everyone seems to think they know. So these are the 3 most common given answers. That's obesity, calorie intake, which kind of goes along with obesity or being overweight, and then, of course, alcohol. But these are the 3. But the reality is none of those are the number one link. The number one link, hands down, without a doubt, is sugar. Our sugar intake in this country is abysmal. It is awful, as we're about to see. According to the American Heart Association, women and children should have no more than 6 teaspoons a day, men 9. That's, 1 teaspoon is 4 grams or 16 calories. So that means, ladies, you can have roughly 100 calories a day, or 24 grams, men 36 or 150. It's all a size thing for the most part. But here's what we're actually doing. Our willpower over sugar is non-existent. 1 8-ounce sugary beverage is 21 to 34 grams. We've done the math, divide by 4. Our average intake has now rose in this country for adults to 33 teaspoons, or 545 calories per day. That's 150 pounds per year, or 11,800 pounds per lifetime. That's right. You can fill up a dump truck with the amount of sugar that we are consuming on a lifetime basis. It is astounding the amount of sugar that is added into our food supply, as well as into our daily diet. Americans consume more calories from this ingredient than from any other source. Now, we've been talking about sugar, so obviously this must be sugar. Unfortunately, this is not something that's even labeled as sugar on the nutritional label. That's right, this is not labeled as a sugar on the label. It is labeled as an other ingredient, and it is high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is consumed. More calories come from this than any other ingredient in the American food supply. It is the thing that we are killing ourselves with. So if we're eating 545 calories of sugar, how much of this are we eating on a regular basis? Well, we start out with this because if you look at it closely, what you're going to find is that in 1970, when this stuff was introduced into our food supply, our obesity rates have gone up at basically a same level. If you believe in coincidence, good for you. I'm not a big believer in coincidence. The reality is what we're dealing with here is Since the introduction of high fructose corn syrup, the rate of people being obese in this country has gone up exponentially right along the consumption curve of high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup has zero nutritional value. It's what we call a zero or an empty calorie. There is no nutritional value. Just like refined processed sugar has zero nutritional value, high fructose corn syrup, again, no nutritional value whatsoever. It just has a huge value with regard to what it does to our waistline. And in fact, if you look at it more closely, 1 tablespoon of sugar is 48 calories. 1 tablespoon of high fructose corn syrup is 53 calories. So that's right. This is the thing we're consuming more than anything else. And we're already consuming a lot of sugar. Now, of course, you can see we're consuming more of this than anything else. In fact, the average American is consuming roughly about 35 pounds or 127,460 calories of high fructose corn syrup every single year. That's right, we are consuming a lot of this stuff. Almost a pound of it a week is how bad it has now gotten. That's 349 calories per day if you're trying to figure out the math. That's 14% of the average daily 2,534 calories Americans consume. That's right, the average American consumption is now up to 2,534 calories per day, of which 349 of those calories can be directly linked to high fructose corn syrup, which is 14% of our diet. So let's talk about this myth, because this is a myth that is literally killing diabetics. Controlling my sugar will control my diabetes. Well, you need to understand that sugar is a good thing to control if you're diabetic, but it is not the only thing you should be concerned with. There are a lot of other things that you need to watch. And in fact, the American Heart Association does a good job of basically telling you what those are. First, you need to maintain a healthy weight. Weight is a big indicator of controlling your diabetes. 2, healthy food choices. Again, just controlling your sugar alone, a lot of times people try to do that with just a pharmaceutical. The reality is we have to make better food choices along the way. We have to stay active. It doesn't mean you have to join a gym and work out every day, but it does mean you have to keep moving. People are sedentary. They just sit in chairs all day long and look at computer screens. They have to move. And of course, stopping smoking will also help benefit from that. You also need to understand the diabetes ABCs when it comes to heart health. That's right, there are ABCs. That is your A1C, your blood pressure, and your cholesterol. You notice this month we've been talking about blood pressure, cholesterol. Today is diabetes. Next week you'll see real soon is kind of the culmination of those 3 that we'll talk about in just a sec. But here are the results. You know, you guys have learned a lot today on this webinar that you may or may not have known. But don't feel alone, because 52% of adults with type 2 diabetes do not understand that they are at an increased risk of heart disease. That's right, 52% of people that actually have the disease, more than half, had no idea that there was an increased risk of heart disease as a result of having the disease, and they have it. 74% of Americans do not know heart disease is the number 1 killer of people with type 2 diabetes. Let that set in for a second. 3/4 of people do not even know that the leading killer of people with type 2 diabetes is heart disease. And of course, 67% of those with type 2 diabetes do not know that heart disease is the number 1 killer of people with type 2. So even the people that have heart disease, 2 out of 3, don't even know that they are much more likely to die of heart disease than anything else. See, only 34% of people overall and 41% of people with type 2 were even aware that type 2 diabetes created an increased risk of heart disease. Now, there's a lot of things going on here. You know, there can be a lack of knowledge in the medical community, which I can't imagine. It could be just a lack of knowledge from the individual not listening to their doctor when they get the diagnosis of diabetes. It can be just a lack of information, but here's the reality. If we have that number of people, almost 100 million people in this country that are diabetic and pre-diabetic, and we have such an abysmal rate of knowledge when it comes to, hey, look, the increased risk of heart disease, what does that say about our reliance on just trying to say, hey, doc, tell me everything I need to know? We have to take control of our health. We have to do something about it. In fact, 99% of people said if they knew that type 2 diabetes increased the risk of heart disease, they would do something about it. See, that's the interesting part. 99% of people would have done something about it had they simply known. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is key. The whole purpose of these lunch and learns is to give you the knowledge so that you can share this information with the people that you care about, the people that you love, and the people that you're trying to help. That's what this is about. Okay, but you need to also understand that more than 80% of people that would speak to their healthcare provider that would also change their diet and eating habits and exercise had they known that type 2 diabetes would have or could result in the increased risk of heart disease. That's right. People actually know what to do. They know that they're going to have to change their diet and they know they're going to have to change their lifestyle. That is a natural change that people need to make if you have this disease. Do not wait till it breaks because you may be one of that large number of people that don't get the second chance. If you want to learn more what we got going on here at ID Life and what we're about, then by all means, I encourage you to plug in. But the whole idea behind what we're doing here is to teach people about how diet and lifestyle choices are creating nutritional gaps, and that when you actually have your nutrition in the right place, you have your diet in the right place, and you have your fitness in the right place, or your lifestyle, you literally have healthy living. That's what it's all about, and that's what we're here to help you do.